B Economic Mobility Update, Dr. Worsley.
Yeah, I guess come on up.
Good afternoon and welcome. It's good to see you all. Again, welcome back. That's good news.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board, Dr. Casey. It's a pleasure to be here today. We are going to be talking about economic mobility, and just to set the stage, there's actually going to be a theme that's going to be going on today regarding economic mobility. After the conversation that we have here today, the next work session is going to be an annual update from the Department of Social Services. So we built this conversation to move right into social services update in the theme of economic mobility as well. So to set the stage and kind of level set, what is economic mobility? We may have people in the audience, people that may also be listening at home. So we want to also tell you what economic mobility is as well. But before I do that, we have some experts that are also in the room that have come from our nonprofit community, and I also want to introduce them after I give a brief introduction, and we'll turn it over to them in just a second. First, we have Kelly King Horne. She's Executive Director over at Homeward, and she is also, many of you probably already know, she's an award winner for the Bravo Awards here recently that we all attended at the Perkins Center, so we are very happy to have her here as well. We also have Jovan Burton here with us today. He is the chair of, known as the Greater Richmond Continuum of Care, and also the Executive Director of Partnership for Housing Affordability. We also have with us today Karen O'Brien, who is the Executive Director of Caritas. And last but not least, certainly we have Beth Vann-Turnbull, who is here from Family First, Housing Families First, excuse me. So that being said, I'm going to move forward and answer the question, kind of level set again. What is economic mobility? We may not have seen this particular slide before in terms of seeing economic mobility. Some folks might call the term upward economic mobility, but just in simple terms, when we look at economic mobility, we're really focusing on, refers to the ability of individuals, the ability to move up or down in this case, if you're looking at in terms of a ladder over time, which can be influenced perhaps by factors such as you see here in this model. It could be education, it could be income, it could be shelter, it could be social connections, it could be finances, it could be food, it could be a myriad of things that we're going to talk about. We're not going to spend time on all of these items today, particularly those items, education and healthcare, may come back at a later time, but we did want to spend some time talking about some of the other things that I think will float out pretty nicely in the conversations between this group of nonprofits and leading into our social services team in just a little bit. Also, I also want to say that this work that we are doing when it comes to economic mobility doesn't stop just here in Chesterfield. We actually are on the national and international level when it comes to local government leadership of economic mobility. Chesterfield County, along with 9 other localities around the U.S., have been featured with ICMA, which is ICMA stands for International City Council Management Association, and the work that we've done here locally, and thanks to many of our partners here in departments in the county. I want to also give a shout out to Akiva Rogers and her team for social services that help us with this work regarding economic mobility here locally. Also in the Economic Development Department, Tina Shreve. She was also instrumental in the work we've done here. And also our Community Engagement and Resource Department, led by Kim Connolly and her team. That being said, I'm going to give you a very brief video here that you're going to be able to take a look to see what others are saying at the national level, and you may or may not see someone in this video that you also know.
During the past year, ICMA has offered a series of learning and training opportunities to 10 different localities, all focused on boosting upward mobility. Members of the Economic Mobility Cohort join us now here in studio to explain. Thank you both for your time today.
Glad to be here.
All right, let's get started with some of the ideas that you generated that led to you being selected as one of the 10 localities.
So Grand Island, Nebraska is my hometown, and I moved back there a year ago, and one of the things I noticed was that transit really had not changed much in 25 years. We have a dial-a-ride system that's very well used, very heavily used, very popular with the users, but not conducive for someone who wants to use public transportation to get to work or to technical training. You have to schedule it a day in advance, and you have to do that every time you want to use it. So definitely not convenient for someone looking to commute. So what we put together was a proposal to partner with our community college and with our high school to actually connect our residents with jobs and technical training through some type of different mode of transportation. And that was our proposal to ICMA, that we would put together that and we'd come up with an implementable plan and get that underway and going. That's not quite what we end up with, but that's what we started with.
Okay, very creative. So transportation needs. James, what about you?
Absolutely. So I'm in Chesterfield County, Virginia, and we're a community of about 370,000 residents. And so right away, we saw also, similar to Laura, transportation is certainly important. Workforce development is another piece that we saw that was important. Also, financial literacy was important as well. So our focus, among many, what we're going to focus just on a couple, workforce development, financial literacy, to make that and move forward in our community. How we did that, we started to put together what I call micro conferences or micro sessions, and we moved out into the community and started having micro events.
That's amazing. And you are a little bit further along in the process. So let's kind of elaborate on some of the success stories that you've seen.
Moving into the program that we currently have, we call them pop-up events. LEAP is one of our learning educational programs that we have in the community. And I mentioned the partnerships with the YMCA, which was one of our community events we had. And so we had these sessions, and they were about 20 to 30 minutes each, focused on workforce development. So partnering with the local community college, partnering with our human resource department as we bring in individuals that, hey, we know that people need jobs, but they don't often have the job skills ready or know how to fill out even a basic application, a resume. So having staff on hand to work with individuals to do that.
There's lots of incredible success stories there. Laura, I want to ask you, for both feedback that you hear from your community members and then also the data that you gather, what are some of the biggest barriers to upward mobility that you find?
The first barrier we hit was disbelief that a problem existed, that people actually had a need or that they would use a different mode of transportation if we provided it. So that really was hurdle one, and I had that right in-house in my staff.
Wow.
Yeah, actually we did a press release about getting the grant, and I had panic from our transit manager, our public works director, saying, how can we implement this? We don't have the funding, we don't have the time, and we don't think there's a problem. So we actually had to kind of pivot right away in the grant process and working with ICMA to kind of change our scope of work to say, okay, we have to prove the problem exists.
And speaking of funding, you have an incredible sponsor in the form of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. How much does that support help with your initiatives?
I would have to say that it's huge. We are so thankful for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation in partnership with ICMA to make this happen. Otherwise, this is funding that we wouldn't have, and we wouldn't be able to try this pilot case to work with our youth, our young adults, to make this happen in the Chesterfield County community. So again, we extend our heartfelt thanks from all of our board members in Chesterfield County and our county administrator as well.
Well, our thanks to the both of you for all of the incredible work that you're doing, and certainly our thanks to you for your time this morning. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. And on the right outside on the periphery, I'll give Dr. Casey credit. He was there too. He was cheering us on as we went through the interview process. So thank you, Dr. Casey. At this time, in interest of time, I'm going to move right over to our presenters to get started, and I'm going to start with Kelly King Horne from Homeward. And board members, I will make sure you get a copy of the article that I referenced just a few minutes ago. Kelly?
Yeah, great. So, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the board, thank you for having us. Again, my name is Kelly King Horne. I first moved to Chesterfield County in 1977 when my dad got out of the Navy. So my parents were early adopters, and I've been a homeowner in the same neighborhood in Clover Hill since 2003. So I've experienced a lot of the changes that have been shared, and I think we're going to talk about homelessness, which is a very different topic, but we're going to pick up the themes on excellence in service, focusing on the needs of people as people that we heard, starting with the recognition, and then following up on the sports tourism with intentionality. And I think you'll hear those themes in the little bit that we share today about our regional work, which includes Chesterfield County and has from the beginning to address homelessness. And so I do have some handouts, which I'll hand out maybe when I'm finished. I could talk a lot about data, and I'm not going to do that because I really want you to hear from our partners, and I'll let them introduce themselves. But I wanted to share a little bit about how we tackle the crisis of homelessness. Again, we're very intentional. We do take a regional approach, and we have from the beginning. Our region has been really one of the leaders, an early adopter in addressing homelessness in a coordinated way since 1997. My agency that I manage is a nonprofit, Homeward. We were created to facilitate this collaborative effort, and we continue to do that. And actually just late last night, we submitted the most recent coordinated funding application to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development for just over $8 million to support ongoing and hopefully new efforts to address homelessness. So that got submitted last night. That was pretty exciting. And we do have an incredible collaborative infrastructure that enables us to really take on the crisis of homelessness. Again, it's a national model on how we do it. It's like all systems is a bit complex, but you're going to hear from some of our, practitioners. Again, excellence and a history of service in the community. And I just do want to highlight that our coordinated approach, and we do have our most recent annual report, which some of you have seen from the last fiscal year of July 23 to June 2024, right? That gives you a very recent snapshot. But since, going back 12 years, this collaborative approach has helped more than 13,000 people in our region find stable housing, right? So this is a model that works, and we're going to share just a little bit, give a snapshot of it. And again, every day we're serving about 1,000 people in shelter and housing throughout the region. The providers, serve people based on need, and we're really targeting our regional residents. I don't know where. Okay, and you don't have to read this slide, but I do want to highlight there are affordable housing is really top of mind for so many people now if they're trying to help their, aging parent find an affordable place. If someone lease ends and they're looking for someplace new, or, the case managers working in our schools are trying to help families stabilize. And we know that there's a lot of issues going on that are related to housing. We really focus on homelessness. So we're usually clear about what we're talking about, what the data points are. And that's just, I think that approach to addressing this problem is really impactful. We also know that there are many things happening in our communities. Y'all see it, the police and fire and DSS see it up close and personal as well, and the Community Services Board. We have an affordable housing crisis across the country. There's also substance abuse, and Caritas can say a little bit about that. And we know that there's a mental health crisis as well. And so, again, our network is really laser focused on addressing homelessness, and we know that that impacts so many other things that we're trying to do as a community. And I will just end, not quite, right, but just a little bit of data. So some of you have participated in our census, our point-in-time counts, where we go out and talk to people in Chesterfield, Henrico, and the city, who are living outdoors in our community. They're relatively small numbers, but any number greater than 0 is too high. And this is just a little bit of data. And I think it is worth noting, we ask people what is the main cause of their homelessness. And this, to me, is a way to sort of break down myths. People tell us the main reason is a family or relationship breakdown, right? That it really is, that's why being person-centered is so important. And then there are economic reasons really driving this crisis here and across the country. And then we do know what works to solve homelessness. I mean, this is this, focus on excellence and service and history. We know that coordinating our efforts allows us to wring every penny out of every grant or funding resource that's available, having a really clear pathway for people so they know how to get help. I had a whole stack of these, and Ms. Schneider gave them to the police because they need it the most. But we have resource cards, and they're available digitally, and I do have some for y'all, and we are printing more. It's also, available online. So that people know where to start and what, in a confusing landscape during a time of crisis, what's your next call? We have very targeted efforts, really, again, targeting people who are, quite frankly, most likely to die because of the lack of housing. So that's where we start. We have done a lot of work in our community to provide low-barrier shelters. This doesn't mean no accountability, but it means that we're meeting people where they are in their moment of crisis and not putting additional roadblocks up at front. And then finally, our job is to focus on housing stability, helping people like run their credit report, figure out what's their, rental history, to get someone into housing and make connections to county resources, regional resources, other nonprofits, so that they can be successful. And with that, you're going to hear two programmatic examples that both support Chesterfield County residents, and then our coalition chair will drive us home. So thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, supervisors, and Dr. Casey. Thank you so much for having us. Again, I'm Beth Vann-Turnbull. I'm Executive Director of Housing Families First. And to Kelly's point, we want to talk a little bit about what works. So Housing Families First, our mission is to give families facing homelessness the opportunity to build a family legacy by giving them a path to a permanent home. We work with over 725 family members a year. That's about 220 families. And across our 5 housing programs, 90% of who we work with moves into permanent housing. And what I'm here to talk about today is our program called Bringing Families Home. So let me set the issue for you. There are inconsistent definitions at the federal level between the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, and the Department of Education. And this creates a gap where thousands, literally thousands, of Chesterfield County students face housing instability without access to housing interventions. So while HUD's narrow definition restricts assistance to only literally homeless families, they're in a car, on the street, in a abandoned house storage unit, we see all of that, or within 3 days of that, the Department of Education's broader definition recognizes unstable situations like doubling up or living in motels as experiencing homelessness. So these students and families in this doubled up and hotel situation can literally be in those situations for years. In the past year, we've helped a family who came out of Chesterfield. They were in the hotel for 5 years. They just can't get out of that hole and get into their own place. So the solution one of the solutions is our Bringing Families Home program. It bridges this gap by supporting highly mobile, unstably unhoused students and their families that are referred by your Chesterfield Colonial Heights Department of Social Services, by the Chesterfield County Public Schools McKinney-Vento office, that's your homeless specialist office, the Regional Housing Resource Line from Partnership for Housing Affordability, and or your communities and schools of Chesterfield, and provide them with housing counseling, financial assistance with move-in expenses, and supportive services to help them resolve their housing instability. And as I'm sure you know, stable housing has been shown by research to improve school attendance, academic achievement, and behavioral outcomes for students. So that's what we want to do. This is targeted prevention to keep people from ending up in the street in shelters. So a quick snapshot of the need in Chesterfield. Since 2020, Bringing Families Home has served 301 Chesterfield family members. That's 112 adults and 189 children across 80 households. In contrast, during that very same period, so a 4.5-year period, only 21 people whose last permanent residence was in Chesterfield, only 21 people were referred to our emergency shelter, Hilliard House, which for 3.5 of the past 4.5 years was the largest family shelter in the region. So what this underscores is the fact that there are people experiencing homelessness, they need shelter, but when it comes to families and limited resources, the most impactful investment may be this targeted prevention for families doubled up and living in hotels rather than emergency shelter beds, because you have far many more in that situation than people who are literally in the street.
So let me just say, that's a great point you mentioned, because we tend to want to create a shelter and then leave them. But we need to be helping people at their greatest need. And 5 years in a hotel is way too long for families in our community, Chesterfield. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And it's like traffic. If you have 10 lanes of traffic and one exit with a few houses, creating 20 more lanes of traffic doesn't do anything but create more of a traffic jam. So people have to have a place to go. Housing on both, crisis intervention, but a place to live. And that's what we're focused on. So the impact of bringing families home, overall, we have a 75% success rate of families moving into permanent housing through the program. That is typically within about 60 days of enrollment. And so far, to our knowledge and using the data system, less than 3% of those families we've housed through bringing families home have actually ever ended up in a shelter or on the street since then. So it does work. Our current Chesterfield partnership through your Community Enhancement Department, we have been awarded a contract for $300,000 in ARPA funding that will enable at least 45 households and 165 Chesterfield family members. We think it'll be much more, but we wanted to be conservative in the contract. It will help us move them into homes of their own by the fall of 2026. And while I have the mic, I have worked here for 10 years in homeless services, and I worked outside Atlanta, Georgia for 12 years in homeless services. And so I've been around a minute, and your human services and Dr. Worsley and your Department of Social Services with Ms. Kiva Rogers is the most amazing I've ever worked with as far as caring about people and having actual. Everybody cares about people, but they also want to be strategic. And they also do things like we need benefits letters, things like that to help people apply for housing. They have access to that. And because they're in this partnership, which is more robust than we have in the city and Henrico, we have access to that. And for every day we're not waiting on a benefits letter and income, is a day we're closer to housing, and that's what keeps the system moving. So I know you know that, but like as somebody who's been around for a long time, I just want you to hear it again.
We don't mind hearing it again.
And the request beyond, we are so grateful for the ARPA funding, but as you know, ARPA will end. So over the next 2 years, as we're working through the ARPA funding, I'd love to continue our partnership with the county to find some ongoing funding to help families going forward past this. So thank you for your time, and I will turn it over to Karen.
Thank you.
Okay, that good? Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, Board of Supervisors, and Dr. Casey. I'm Karen O'Brien. I am the CEO at Caritas. Happy to be here. Happy to be a Chesterfield resident for 25 years and relocated here from California. So that's really great and learned a lot today. So that was really exciting. Caritas has a 38-year history of preventing and ending homelessness in the Richmond region, which is all what Kelly talked about, and we participate in that continuum of care. We have grown a lot in the last years. Our mission has expanded, and we really are about creating a safe space for people to heal and time to rebuild their lives. And when Kelly mentioned, all of those forces, mental health, drug addiction, housing, affordable housing, we really sit at the intersection of all of those things and have for a lot of years. So we accomplish what we do by offering 5 programs for healing and rebuilding to our neighbors that are struggling with addiction, housing insecurity, unemployment or underemployment, or a combination, and oftentimes it really is a combination of these things. So let me just walk you briefly through. You can see up there on the slide our programs. There is no linear. You do not need to go from one to the other. They are available to the community. The Healing Place, really where we empower individuals to overcome addiction with compassionate, peer-driven, long-term care, and that really is the key. There is no fee to come to the Healing Place. It is free to the people that come, and they receive support usually for 6, 9, 12 months. So it's a long-term program, and they are housed, and they also receive work readiness support so that they can get back to work and become self-sufficient. Our emergency shelter, different than Beth's, we focus on single adults. We have 64 beds for men and women, different shelters. We are the only single women's shelter in the region. So if a single woman needs emergency shelter, they will be coming to us. We also offer the wraparound supports of case management, 3 meals a day, navigation, housing navigation, document navigation, very complicated. And honestly, initially, it is a place to get safe off the streets and really have time to start to heal from the trauma and to really think about, okay, where do I go next? What is my pathway? And we come together with supports to help them find that. The Recovery Residences is our newest program, and that is a 47 apartment-style recovery residence. It's been hugely successful. I know Jessica's been down to see it. We have a waiting list. These are beautiful, I always call them Scott's Addition type apartments. People want to live in them, they're fully furnished. We've created a community around it, and people are wanting to live there after they learn to be sober, and they have supports, and they have people who are cheering them on, and they're building recovery capital, and it is a place of hope and healing. And then they're not meant to stay there. You know, they may for a year, they could for 2 years. They're really meant to move on and go back into the community. And what that self-sufficiency, it's really about going back and really tapping into their God-given potential, right? And then they become tax-paying citizens, and then they start, working again. And so it's really exciting to see that full process. Our Caritas Works program, that's equipping folks with work readiness skills, life skills, leadership skills, character building. It's all built into a 6-week program that we have designed specifically for people with barriers to employment. Lots of gaps, drug use, haven't been able to work, incarceration. We tackle all of that in our 6-week class, and about 90% get jobs within 30 days. So it works, it's targeted, and it's also something available that we would love to share in a bigger way with Chesterfield. And then our furniture bank, which is just what it sounds like. It is where we collect household goods and furnishings for folks, and we gather them, sort and organize them with a bunch of volunteers, and we give them back away to people who are coming out of some kind of crisis. So that's how we do it. When leveraged together and activated, they really do create pathways to stability and self-sufficiency. So as you can see, Chesterfield, our Chesterfield residents, from our data, we can see that about 5 to 6% of our participants are call Chesterfield home. Chesterfield has supported us through their general fund for the last 10 years, so thank you very much. In this past year, we did get an increase, so thank you also for that. And you did help invest in our Caritas Center. So we have about an $8.5 million budget. And we see probably 2,100 unique individuals a year through our services. So it's a big footprint. We do a lot of good work. A fair amount of it is in homeless services, but it crosses over to a lot of other areas. And honestly, I think our ask of Chesterfield is just a greater partnership. We'd love to do more with Chesterfield. You guys are doing awesome things. You're collaborative. And honestly, we'd love to, as you're talking about affordable housing, you're talking about zoning and different things, recovery housing doesn't need to be scary. I think it can be really exciting. It's full of potential. It's full of hope. The apartment style that we have is really a model that's being recognized across the country. So we have had tours from everywhere across the country. We have drug courts looking at the style and model, and we are set up so that we could provide technical assistance. We could provide guidance. We could even provide operation services. So I just think there's a chance to collaborate there. And I think the workforce program is a natural partner for that. And I think, continued operating support. It is fun and interesting to fund new things, but, we've been doing this hard work for almost 38 years, and it's not going away. People are struggling. They need to have a place to go. So supporting us with the general fund, capital needs, if we have things that need to be spruced up, beds that need to be replaced, roofs that need to be fixed, and even self-resolution funds. We have found that when people are in crisis and they come in and they need to launch back into self-sufficiency, they need a kickstart. Deposit a first month's rent and that kind of thing that has some flexibility, and that's actually very successful. So thank you for what you've done with Caritas and beside us, and we look forward to greater partnership. We'd love to collaborate even more. So thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, and
No,
Dr.
Mr.
Casey.
Burton, welcome back. It's good to see you back. Good to see you back.
Thank you. I was asked to come here with a different hat on today, not my Partnership for Housing Affordability hat, but chair of the Board of Directors for the Continuum of Care. obviously the two are very closely intertwined. And so my role here today is pretty simple, to talk about the strategies that the county could pursue in order to reduce and prevent homelessness. And I think those two are the operative words there. We're talking about reduction and prevention. And the strategies and the programs that our two service providers and partners have talked about today really fit into these buckets. If you're going to address this issue, and I do want to be clear, it is solvable. It's something that you can make a significant impact in if you focus upstream, if you focus on reduction and prevention. So there's really two buckets here. There's the two on the left and the two on the right. So the two on the left start with prevention, and the idea, I know it's a little small, but the idea of creating a targeted prevention fund, which enables organizations like, I'll point out, the leader in eviction prevention here in our region, ACTS, or Area Congregations Together in Service. But their role is to focus on those who are well before the eviction process, well before thinking about needing something like diversion or shelter, and really are in a situation that's called otherwise sustainable. If this one event that I couldn't have predicted didn't occur, I would be just fine. And they do a deep dive with those individuals and their budget and making sure that they can be sustainable beyond that one-time assistance. But having targeted prevention will ensure that you don't have to devote more county staff and first responders to carrying out things like evictions or responding to instances of housing instability and crisis. And it's just the much more cost-effective strategy. So the other one, which is a little bit more long-term, and we've talked about this, it speaks to housing. You need to have exits from homelessness. And if you don't have exits, that's going to create longer stays in shelter, which means longer stays for those who are unsheltered. And so permanent supportive housing is a proven strategy for that. We have a great one that I think many of you have toured recently, Cool Lane Commons, that was completed in the city in Henrico by Support Works Housing. And our gaps analysis for the region shows that there's roughly a gap of 350 permanent supportive housing units here across the region. And these are units targeted to serve folks that not only need housing, but require services on site to ensure that they can be permanently housed and have the necessary supports in place, whether that's folks that are chronically homeless or people who have permanent disabilities. But it's really targeting a specific population that needs the additional supports. And well over 90% of people who are in permanent supportive housing do not return to homelessness. So again, these are strategies that we know work very well. And whether these are financial investments or thinking about through zoning process where you can build the type of housing that we're talking about, or if there's land opportunities where these housing developments can take place in the future. And the other two on the right are more so focused on the homeless reduction strategy. So supporting the organizations that we've talked about today, but also those that are part of the continuum of care, whether that be shelter operations, whether that be housing navigation staff. I'll emphasize that for a moment because a lot of the work within shelter is dedicated towards things like housing navigation. That means negotiating with landlords and doing outreach with them to ensure that this is a client who will be a good tenant moving forward. And maybe we can provide flexible funding to help, as Karen said, get them kickstarted with whether that be a security deposit or first month's rent, but really having to do a lot of that negotiation and partnership work, which is essential to get people out of shelter and into permanent housing long term in a much more efficient manner. If we could increase the capacity with that, that would make more beds available in our current system and alleviate pressure on that. And again, we're also establishing partnerships with landlords around the region to understand that folks exiting out of shelter from our trusted partners are going to be good tenants and important parts of this community. So again, it's just having the flexibility. I think is where Chesterfield can be most impactful, and some of these strategies to be more targeted towards prevention and reduction. And again, we have partners here in this room who do this work every day and can help you understand what that looks like, exactly what's needed. These strategies come from our investment strategy that the Continuum of Care has created. All of the local governments here in the region, for the most part, have representation on the Continuum of Care as well. So you have staff or others who are part of this and these conversations. We're happy to continue those moving forward.
I do just want to call, Kiva Rogers serves on the Continuum of Care Board, and then Jessica Segura from the Enhancement Department is on the Funding Review Committee. So they are just essential partners in this work already.
So that's all we have. We'll turn it over to you
Well,
all for
great,
questions.
thank you. Dr. Casey, you want to comment?
Yeah,
And then supervisors will give you a
Yeah, and I'll
chance.
just expand upon while it's on the screen before, the time for you all to appropriately comment. For the permanent supportive housing, one initiative that we are regionally participating in, with your consent, has been Henrico, Richmond, and Chesterfield have pledged all of their federal dollars that were for supportive housing to a unified process. Now, there's lots of federal processes with that process, but I think it's going to be 60 to 70 units will be created from that. But we are a partner at the table through some of the people that you're before you. So that is one category. Now, 70 units is only maybe 20% of the 350 units shown on there, but it's your intentionality to participate and participate regionally.
Thank you, Dr. Casey. Supervisors, any comments or questions at this point? Well, go ahead, Supervisor Snyder.
So I have been happy to come and visit. Caritas is doing an amazing, it's, if you haven't seen it, it's amazing. The, from the beginning, the more intensive, classes that they have for people going out of addiction and the support staff that they have, and the way they move them up. It's just an awesome program from like dormitory to a double apartment to their own apartment. It just builds more trust, and it's just an awesome style. So, and Cool Lane is also a great way of doing that too. I just think that we just have to continue to look outside the box and look for solutions and buildings that are sitting empty, and how can we maybe convert them like Cool Lane was, or so there's definitely, I think about this a lot. So thank you so much for all that you guys are doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor. Anyone else? Anyone else? Dr. Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of things that were kind of come through when you were talking, and I love the idea that you're resisting the urge to work in silos. It's so easy to fall into that trap, and I've heard that a couple of times with folks in the community, where it's easy to fall into the trap of, this is your domain, this is my domain, instead of this being our domain. And so I just loved hearing that. I was picking up on a theme that Police Chief Carpenter was talking about during his interview, is that it's one thing to be part of a team, but it's another thing to be part of an ensemble. And I really like the idea that everyone is bringing their own musical instrument to this, and their voice, whatever that is, but to be part of an ensemble. So I just love that's what's going on here. I am excited that I'm going to be coming to you on November 1st. That's on my calendar, and very excited about that. And finally, just the concept of workforce development. We're very, very lucky, and I got to say I'm partial because I'm at Brightpoint also. So Brightpoint is a partner in all of this and is part of the ensemble. Any way that I can help with that, please, because I just think that the community colleges, especially when it comes to workforce development, really has our finger on where we can do that, especially with, I think it's a G3 program. There is a possibility of folks to come to community college for free. And we need to keep working on that. So I'm excited for y'all, and it's great to hear all of this, and we'll just keep moving forward. Let's get where we need to go.
Thank you, Supervisor. First of all, I want to thank each of you for your outstanding report. Great job. A couple of comments. First of all is Families First. Beth, I want to thank you for your excellent report today, and we're committing to this for the future. As a board member, I'm committing to funding. So today and ongoing list. So thanks for the ask, first and foremost. We appreciate that. And of course, with regard to Caritas as well, I think that's wonderful, and we'll continue to fund you as well. One initiative I want us to work toward is, and I don't know how best to do it, I know staff does, is I want us to reach out to every church family community in Chesterfield County and have them commit to working with Caritas. My church does. We commit money in our budget. We just finished our church budget last week. I watched the process, and so we have committed money to Caritas. So I want every church in this county commit to that goal, because that's part of their mission. Matthew 25, when I was hungry, you fed me. I needed shelter, you gave it, and clothes. So there's a church mission from the Lord, really. So I want us to work toward that end, and I hope it'll take time to get there, but we got to start somewhere. So every church in this county, I hope will commit to doing that as well. And of course, thank you, Ms. Horne, Mr. Burton, for everything. And regarding recovery housing, I appreciate that. Just last week, Dr. Worsley was tasked with getting some money from OAA, Abatement Authority, and I'm looking forward to that because they got a lot of it for recovery housing. So he's been tasked with that, and I'm on that board, and I'm certainly going to be vocal. So I'm the treasurer of the board. I would say money, that board. So anyway, thank you for that recovery housing. We're on our way. We're going to commit to it in this county. No longer we say we don't have, we will have. So, but thank you all for being here, and you all have a great day.